Hello everybody. It's not Thursday, it's not 7 p.m. Why are we doing a Facebook Live? Well, we discovered last night that the first half of our Facebook Live last night didn't broadcast, so there was only the second half there, which kind of like didn't really make sense, didn't stand up. So, we make a commitment to do a 25-30 minute broadcast every Thursday. It didn't happen, so we have to do the whole thing again. So welcome. If you're not usually watching us on a Thursday because you're not around, then you get the great opportunity of seeing us on Friday morning. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is about the hierarchy of ideas, or something that is more commonly known in NLP as chunking, chunking up and chunking down. And I've got a nice bit of history here for you. Because this is actually, the idea of the hierarchy of ideas and chunking in NLP came from Alfred Korzybski and his structural differential. And he talks about this in his book, Science and Sanity. And a friend of mine, Ted Faulkner, wrote the book Creative Intelligence, which is an excellent book, by the way, if you want to get into some of the stuff around Korzybski. He actually had this original Alfred Korzybski structural differential chart. It's actually on linen. It's a beautiful thing. And Korzybski actually built these things out of, almost like, made them physical, out of what looks like bits of Meccano and string, so that people could actually get to grips and feel the structural differential. But the idea of a structural differential, hierarchy of ideas, chunking in NLP, basically comes from the idea that our thinking is structured in different levels of abstraction. And essentially what we've got is our thoughts are structured either in the global, what we might call big picture, all the way down to the specific detail. And it's a continuum from one extreme to the other. And what the hierarchy of ideas gives us is a set of questions to control the level of abstraction that somebody is thinking on, as far as that's concerned. Alistair, hi Alistair. See you in about a week's time out in Hawaii. Looking forward to it. So the hierarchy of ideas gives us a set of questions that enable us to move people through this particular different levels of abstraction. So if we know metaprograms, and I did an earlier Facebook Live on metaprograms, then some people are just naturally into global, big picture thinking. But every now and again, what we want to do is we want to get some real specific, detailed information from them. Then we've got other people who are naturally in the specific detail, and every now and again, what we need to do to enable us to achieve our goals, our intention, is to get them into the global big picture. So what we've got is a set of questions, which I'll introduce you to in a moment, that enable us to take the control of the level of abstraction that somebody's working at. So we've got a number of things, though, here, which I think is interesting as we go through this. So obviously what we have here is abstract, and here we've got specific detail. As we become more and more abstract, what we get is an increasing amount of sameness. And as we get more and more into the detail, we have an increasing amount of difference. So therefore, if we go up here, then we have an increasing amount of agreement. And down here, we have an increasing amount of disagreement. As we become more and more abstract with our thinking, then we get an increasing amount of trance. And here, going down into the detail brings people out of trance. As we become more abstract, things become simpler. As we become more detailed, then things become more complex. Here we have an increasing amount of leverage. And what I mean by leverage is that make a small change in here in the abstract will create a big change down here in the detail. Whereas here we've got less leverage. Because small change down here has an even smaller impact on the abstract. And so because of sameness up here, we have an increasing amount of rapport. Whereas down here we've got less rapport because we have the potential for disagreement in the detail. If we were to map onto here the NLP language models, then obviously up here we have the Milton model, and down here we have the meta model. So those are the characteristics, if you like, the dynamics of the two extremes of the opposite ends of the scale of the hierarchy of ideas. And no matter where our thinking is, it will be somewhere on this continuum. In fact, Alfred Korzybski, in his book Science and Sanity, said that what prevented people from being able to demonstrate sanity, essentially, was an inability to be able to move or transcend through these different levels of ambiguity. So he said some people might get locked into the global big picture and have an inability to come down to the specifics in detail, which would cause them not to be able to demonstrate what he called sanity. Other people get locked and stuck into the detail and have an inability to come up here. So when Korzybski worked with his students, worked with his clients, what he did was he enabled them to move freely on this particular continuum. So let's look at the questions that enable us to take control of this, and then look at some of the applications of this. So I think it's particularly very exciting in business and also in breakthrough sessions. So let's look first at chunking up questions. What we have for chunking up is what purpose, what's your intention, what is that an example of, and the other one, what does that do for you? Any of those questions will chunk the client up. It will increase the level of abstraction that they're working at. If we then look at chunking down questions, then we've got who, when, how, specifically. We have what is an example of that, and also any meta-model question. We'll chunk the person down. So let's now look at how we can use this, because in business, when I do business trainings, one of the things that I find is that, and obviously this is a generalization, which is up in the abstract in and of itself, so obviously all generalizations are not necessarily true, but it's a good generalization that I find from working with business people, is that a lot of business people are very adept at chunking down. In fact, the terminology used in business for this process is drilling down into the detail. They are less adept at chunking up. In fact, quite often they don't even at first even get the concept. But here's a thing in problem solving in business. So let's say we've got a problem here, and what the business owners or the managers in the company do is they drill down into the detail of the problem. What that does is it makes the problem appear bigger and more complex. Whereas what we could do is we could chunk up on the problem and go, okay, so what is this problem an example of? And as we chunk up on the problem, it will appear in our minds to get smaller, it will get simpler, and if we solve the problem at that level, we can make a small change at this level but have a big change in the detail. One of the things we could actually think about with this is that the problem, as we go down here, as we drill down into the detail, what we get is symptoms of the problem. Whereas when we come up here, we actually get the root cause of the problem. So then, if we solve at this level, then what happens is, not only do we get rid of the symptom that we're aware of, we get rid of a whole series of symptoms. So this is quite a nice process to do in business around solving problems that an organisation is facing. We could also look at it in life. It's part of what I do when I do a breakthrough session with a client. Let's just look at how we can do that. So as an example, I'm doing detailed personal history with a client, and let's say that what I've done is I've pulled out 5 limiting beliefs. Or what in timeline therapy or mental emotional release we would call limiting decisions, but they're the same thing essentially. Now what we know just of the hierarchy of ideas, as an example, then what we could well find by chunking up is that those limiting beliefs there are an example of this limiting belief. Those limiting beliefs there are an example of that limiting belief. And ultimately, if we chunk them high enough, those 2 limiting beliefs are an example of that limiting belief. And this one is what I call the linchpin. Because on identifying that higher level limiting belief, which all these limiting beliefs are just an example of, when we get rid of that one, pull out the linchpin, all the other limiting beliefs will disappear too. So, what we could do, identify 5 limiting beliefs, we could do 5 submodality belief changes, we could do 5 limiting decision processes in timeline therapy, mental emotional release. And, it's pretty quick, it's pretty easy. But if you've spent a bit of time identifying this, then we'd only need to do 1 submodality belief change, 1 limiting decision with timeline therapy or mental emotional release. Makes our work significantly more efficient. And also, potentially, there could be other limiting beliefs hanging off that, other examples of that limiting belief that we haven't even found. So how we do this in a breakthrough session is essentially we ask the client's unconscious mind, what are all these limiting beliefs an example of? A higher level limiting belief, which if that higher level limiting belief were to disappear, all these other limiting beliefs would disappear too, if you were to know what that would be, and the client's unconscious mind brings that up. It could be one that's already down here, or it could be a new one. Then we delete that one, and we make sure then and test all of the limiting beliefs below that. So that's a nice way of actually using this process in personal breakthrough sessions as well as in business breakthrough sessions. Now let's look at how we can use this process in creativity. Quite often in business, people want to do what they would call lateral thinking. I think the term was first quoted by Edward de Bono in his fantastic books on lateral thinking. But nowhere in those books does he actually give you a strategy for doing lateral thinking. But with the hierarchy of ideas, we have that. Because what we need to do creative thinking, as well as creative problem solving, is that first we chunk up on wherever we start, and then we chunk back down, but we chunk back down in a different direction. So let me give you an example of that. Let's say that we started out with cars as a concept, and we asked the question, so what are cars an example of? And we get transport. What is transport an example of? And we get movement. We could chunk up on movement even and go like, so what is movement an example of? We could go life, But let's just stick at movement. So then we go, okay, so what is another example of movement which forces the person to come down a different route than the route that they took coming up? So what is another example of movement? And let's say the person says dancing. And then you go, okay, so what is an example of dancing? And let's say the person says a waltz. So there, with just the asking of, what was that, 4 questions, we've gone lateral from cars to waltz. That's pretty lateral. So that's how we could use the hierarchy of ideas to do lateral thinking, to do creativity, to come up with new ideas, to do creative problem solving. Now another thing that we can use this for, and I've already hinted at it here when we looked at this, disagreement is always down here. And we know that if we chunk up on any disagreement, ultimately we will get sameness and agreement. This is the basis of the NLP negotiation model. So let's have a look at how we could use that. So we've got 2 people who are disagreeing. And they're disagreeing in the detail. So obviously one of the things that we can do as an NLP practitioner is we can get these 2 people into rapport, for a start, by matching and mirroring their physiology, because it's very, very, very difficult to maintain a disagreement when 2 people are in rapport. Then, using the hierarchy of ideas, we chunk these 2 people up on the purpose, the intention of their particular stance in this disagreement. And we know the more we chunk them up, then ultimately we are going to get to the point where they agree. So their highest level intention in the disagreement will become the same. It's just a matter of chunking up high enough. It will happen. Now, of course, we're then agreeing at a very, very high level of abstraction. More than likely, they're agreeing on something very conceptual, not something which is easily implementable or actionable. So now what we need to do is we need to chunk them down. But first, what we can do, if we know NLP, is we can anchor the state of agreement in these 2 people, covertly anchor it, either visually or auditorily, so that if we need to, we can fire off this anchor once again. And what we now start doing is, reversing the process, we're going to start chunking down. But we only chunk them down as quickly as we maintain the agreement. So for instance, here we've got agree, agree. Now let's say just here, they disagree. what we now need to do is to go back to here, go back to the last point that they agreed, fire off our agreement anchor, and then chunk them down again, but making sure that we chunk them both down in a different direction than they did previously. Like this. And we keep chunking them down to the point where this becomes agree, and it's at a level that we can actually have them agree on taking mutual action. And that's the basis of the NLP negotiation model. So, really nice concept, very, very, very powerful idea that we can use in all walks of life, particularly, as I say, chunking up. I find chunking up is rather alien to a lot of business people. When I first teach it to them, once they get their head around it, they absolutely love it. It's so powerful. It's also very, very powerful in handling objections. Because, you know, if somebody objects to something, I can't do X, I can't buy from your company, etc., it's stuck. By chunking up and going, okay, so what's your intention, what's your purpose in not buying from my company? It gets it moving again. If we're doing coaching and somebody says, I can't do X, we could chunk down meta model and go, okay, so what stops you from doing X? Or we could chunk up and go, okay, so for what purpose and what's your intention in not doing X? So now we've got a choice as to the direction we take somebody when they're stuck, whether it be a limiting belief in a breakthrough session or whether it be an objection in sales. So, very simple concept, and you know, in that simplicity is its power. So I hope that's been useful for you. If you want to find out more about the hierarchy of ideas in more detail, then it's in the I'm David Shepherd app, it's in the NLP Practitioner Home Study Program, and it's also in Conversational Change, which is our pre-study for our NLP Master Practitioner Program. You can find the app by going to davidshepard.com up there, but also there's a button down below the video which will take you straight to information about it, so you can find out more about that and continue your studies and your personal development in the I'm David Shepherd app. So there we go. Great to see you on this Friday morning. I don't normally get to see you on a Friday morning, so there we go. Great to see you. So we've probably got some different people on Friday morning than we do on Thursday night. We will be back on Thursday night, 7 p.m. British summertime. I think we're still in British summertime here in London. It'll be 1800 UTC. And I will be broadcasting the Facebook Live, all being well that we have internet from the volcano on the big island of Hawaii. So I shall see you next Thursday, all the way from Hawaii. Great to see you, and everybody take care.